Back, everyone. This is the continuing a debate with, well, at this point it feels like a conversation, but it's a good one, and with C.R. Williams, and he's made a video, so I'm gonna do like I used to do because he made the mention, that our videos were getting kind of lengthy, and they were, and I accidentally shot my response in UHD, and I had so much difficult editing that, like, everything got off sync with my video versus my response. Like, I got it really pretty close, but not quite because of what I had to do in editing. There was another video that got off sync, and I don't know even how that happened. I think it was because I deleted like an end clip, and it threw it off a little. But this one, we got the first part of the video that resounded with me right here.
History on the Patriot Act. It was originally authored by Joseph Biden in the 90s. Then it was signed into law under the Bush administration shortly after 9/11. So it was one of those ones we kind of got into law on an emotional response more than a rational. So 2008, it was on Obama's campaign platform that if you were on at least the no-fly list, you should be also a prohibited person.
All right, so on that, talking about the Patriot Act, and that it's really funny to bring that up because when that happened, that was before I knew anything of SJWs. I was just, a liberal. But what I remember from the Patriot Act is that everybody hated that. Like, there were conservative people that didn't appreciate the Patriot Act and liberal people that didn't appreciate the Patriot Act. It seemed like it was an infringement on people's personal rights. It was like, this is really getting into people's privacy. And I had no idea that it had anything to do with gun control. But the Patriot Act in general was just perceived as a huge infringement on people's civil rights and civil liberties to privacy. And I do know that Obama did support the Patriot Act and brought it back into being, and I was aware of that. So I guess now we will go on to the next clip.
All right, so there is already a criteria on what makes somebody a prohibited person. Most of this was passed in 1968. Most of the rules we know governing on who gets to buy a firearm and who does not was actually passed in 1968, and it's been expanded on since then. Like, I know when it was passed, when you're buying a rifle or a shotgun that are NFA Title I, you have to be 18. In the cases of handguns and NFA Title II items, you have to be 21. Now, for a prohibited person factors, well, if you were convicted of a crime punishable by more than 1 year in jail, that makes you a prohibited person. In most cases, that's felonies. Now, in some states, some misdemeanors are punishable by more than 1 year in jail, and unfortunately, they count you as a prohibited person for that. The next one is if you're a fugitive from justice. Okay, understandable. Adjudicated mentally defective. Now, in 1968, when that was passed, that meant you pled not guilty by reasons of insanity. It's since been expanded on. One of the factors is if you've been involuntarily institutionalized or committed to a mental institute for a certain period of time, you're considered a prohibited person. If you're a VA veteran, or if you're a veteran receiving VA benefits, or certain VA benefits anyway, you're a prohibited person. I don't know exactly what the criteria is of that one. I do know.
And in this clip, he's talking about age of consent for firearms and stuff like that. Actually, I would agree that there should be an age of consent, like with tobacco and alcohol as well. and what age would be appropriate to buy handguns or weapons, shotguns, black rifles. I I don't know why it differs on the type of gun versus the age. Like you said, at 18 you can buy certain weapons, and then 21 you can buy other ones. I don't know why that is. That seems to not make sense to me. I think if you are considered a legal adult and responsible enough to have these weapons, I would say that this is a ridiculous law and probably something that is extreme in the liberal community where they're really trying to restrict gun laws through authoritarianism. And authoritarianism is not something I'm a big fan of. The thing that brings authoritarian into the gun control issues is the amount of people that do get hurt by them and the level of irresponsibility that people do have in the gun community. And unfortunately, that, like I said in another video that wasn't really related to our discussions, but unfortunately, there are people that are very, very irresponsible with gun ownership. And that's the thing, is looking at how to hold them accountable and prevent that kind of thing. I don't know what the right answer is without infringing on someone's rights and liberties, because I'm not for authoritarian, but in this instance, I think there's something that should be in place there. And I don't know if the right age would be 18 or 21, but I think it should be one age and not two separate ages based on the type of firearm. I think that's a little excessive and a little ridiculous. And as far as the veteran goes, the VA, I actually have some information on that. There's a friend of mine who he's an ex-Marine guard, and he is not allowed to own a weapon. And the reason why is because he has an extreme case, I mean absolutely extreme case of PTSD from serving his time in the military, or as a Marine guard. And it's gotten to the point where he can't differentiate between right and wrong. And so he has to maintain very calm. He has to be around very calming people. And he's gone through an extensive amount of psychotherapy, as well as taking medications for depression and mood instability and such like that. And and he would even agree that he shouldn't own a firearm, just as I think that I personally believe I should not own a firearm. It's kind of the same relevance, is that he knows that he is somewhat of a danger to people because he doesn't have that mechanism in his brain anymore that differentiates between right and wrong. And you never know, he doesn't even know if he could just snap one day and do the wrong thing and end up regretting it. It's kind of like a blackout moment for him, as he's described to me. So we're talking about a very, very extreme case of PTSD. So that I can see. That I can see not being eligible for firearms, but he has a psychological record now that's pretty thick. And I think if you were to see that in real life and talk to him, I think you would understand the purpose behind that, of saying that he can't own a firearm. Moving on to the next clip.
And the next one, this was actually repealed by Congress. This is a more recent one, but it's certain people receiving certain Social Security benefits became prohibited persons. That was actually expanded on by an executive order made by Barack Obama. That was later repealed by Congress and
People
signed
on
into law
Social
by
Security, I would have to agree, they probably don't need to be using taxpayer money to go out and buy firearms. I don't think it's a safety issue at that point, because it's not necessarily true to say that just because somebody's on Social Security, SSI, SSDI, that they are a violent or at-risk individual of being irresponsible with firearms. It's more of a thing of necessitation, of you're living off of taxpayers' money. This should be going towards things that you need: food, water, electricity, maybe like a small form of entertainment, something cheap like cable. Definitely healthcare. Healthcare, I think, is definitely a necessity. But I know that guns are your right. They are right, your right according to the Constitution. But using taxpayer money to have a gun, I don't know that that's a responsible use of taxpayer money. I think at that point you're kind of surrendering some of your rights under SSI and SSDI, and I know that actually. I've been on SSI, SSDI for my mood disorder, but yeah, you are restricted on your rights a little bit because you're basically getting free money, and it's not a lot of money. Some people think that you can go out and just go on shopping sprees and buy all kinds of drugs and stuff, and there have even been food restrictions now that have been put in place that weren't in place when I was on SSI, SSDI, where they want people that are on this social program to, when they get food stamps, they have to buy things that are approved by the state. And the reason for that is because they don't want the taxpayer money to go to support your unhealthy lifestyle of just massively eating Twinkies and Ho-Hos. It's like this is to keep you alive, to keep you with sustenance and nutrients in your body, not so you can go out and splurge on junk food. That's not what it's for. It's there to keep nutrients in your body. It's not for buying things that we want. It's for buying things that we need. And so when you do push yourself over to SSI, SSDI, supplemental security income, supplemental or social or disability income, you are at that point kind of limiting yourself on some rights and liberties or privileges, because you're basically living off of the government. It would be like somebody moving into your home and they're not making any money and they have to rely on you. You're going to lay down some laws and saying, like, no, you're not going out and buying weed. You're buying things that you need, not things that you want. It has to be boiled down to necessity because it's a limited resource. And you have to use it responsibly and respect the fact that this is being given to you with no effort, no work involved. So yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the side effects of going on SSI, SSDI. A lot of people don't like it, and it really is a small amount of money. When I was on it for a legitimate disability reason, and it was $600 a month. $600 a month. You can't really do shit on $600 a month. So I would think it would be an incredible waste of money to spend that small amount of money to go and purchase a firearm rather than food, electricity, necessities. Absolute necessities. Not things we desire, not things that we want. It's necessities only to keep you alive. Next clip.
And the last one, it was passed in 96, I think it was. I know it was in the 90s, the Lautenberg Amendment. That makes anybody who has been convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence a prohibited person. That's something I think they need to rethink. I know it's a little off topic, but certain things are pertinent because we are talking about whether or not somebody with a misdemeanor domestic violence conviction should be allowed to own a firearm. And actually, right now, it's already illegal. And even more so, the gun controllers have not stopped talking about this issue. In fact, they have taken part in the polarization of this issue too. And it's a highly polarized issue. And I think more often than not now, people are taking this issue with more of a political goal in mind than a political and emotional based goal in mind, as opposed to anything rational.
Now, I know in that clip I skipped over some more prohibited persons stuff, and how I feel on prohibited persons, I don't think it should be as extensive as it is. That's personally how I feel about it. like I said, I'm not for authoritarian, but I do think that there should be some limitation, and that would include, like the people on government income, people with severe mood disorders. I think that's something that should be looked into. I'm not so sure about this no-fly list and the block list and all that. That just all sounds unconstitutional. I'm just simply talking about a background check and doing things that restrict a person who is likely to be very, very irresponsible, or basically somebody who has a high likelihood of doing a high crime or a major crime using a firearm. As long as we're doing things, I think, to keep that out of the equation. And honestly, if somebody's like that far like into criminal activity, they're probably going to find a weapon on the black market anyway, or find a way around the laws anyway. But I still think that should be in place and try and make it harder for them to obtain a weapon if their motivation or their motive of getting a firearm is suicide or homicide, murder, things like that. But for self-defense, shooting at ranges, things like that, I don't really have a problem with any of that. And now we're getting into spousal abuse, though, and you have a long section on spousal abuse or domestic violence and that kind of thing. And absolutely, the SJW movement, the neo-feminism, plays a huge role in that. And that's something that anti-SJWs have discussed, is that, there are females that abuse their husbands. There are females that have actually done some horrific things to their husbands. And this is something that the feminists do not like to acknowledge. They feel that masculinity is toxic and that the only way you're going to be violent is if you're male. It's all about males, especially white heterosexual males, are the prime targets for neo-feminism. And it's very unfortunate, and you are absolutely right about that, is that they do overblow the statistics and the data on that, and they don't pay attention to some real issues as far as domestic violence goes. I think that the majority of people out there agree that anybody who is being abused by their significant other should probably, I wouldn't even say probably, they should get out of that relationship. I don't know that anyone advocates for somebody being abused, other than somebody who's really twisted in their head. But yes, the neo-feminists, they stretch that word abuse or domestic violence to extremes that don't make any sense at all. None. And I would not call neo-feminists liberals. They are way too authoritarian to be liberals. Way too authoritarian. They want too much control. This whole PC narrative and toxic masculinity. And it's like, look, we're both in need of each other. Like, people won't exist without males and females. I mean, this is just basic biology. But I don't think anyone agrees that a man should be abused by a woman or a woman should be abused by a man. And even in homosexual relationships, I actually had to call the police once because there was a lesbian couple where one of the members, one of the people in this relationship, she was abusing her partner to the point of choking her. And knowing about psychology and the progression of physical violence and everything, if you're choking somebody, there's a lot of instances where you see domestic violence in that kind of scenario eventually lead to accidental murder. This does happen. And so normally I don't intervene. Normally I keep to myself and I mind my own business. But when I hear somebody screaming for help because they're being strangled, I did call the police because that's dangerous. Like, it would be sad to hear about this woman being on the news, and her body being found in a ditch because her girlfriend strangled her to death. So I don't think anybody in any situation, male or female, I think male, female is irrelevant. If somebody's physically in harm, they do need to get out of that situation and absolutely seek legal attention, because you're hurting someone else. You're imposing an authoritative will on someone else with physical violence. It's destructive mentally and physically. It could be the end of your life at some point if you don't do anything about it. So absolutely, do something about that. But the interpretations of domestic abuse and neo-feminism have gone beyond that. It has gone to, raising your voice or something like that. And where I live, I don't know that that's necessarily a thing. I think if I called the police because me and my boyfriend were arguing, or if somebody called the police because me and my boyfriend were arguing about something, the police around here generally look at it as what they call a domestic dispute, to which they don't get involved in. If there has been no bodily harm, if there has been no abuse, they literally don't get involved. They literally just say it's a domestic dispute, you have to work it out on your own. They might write you a citation for being noisy and disturbing the neighbors or something like that. Even though there's no noise ordinance, there's kind of an implied one. But where I live, no, that's not a thing. And I'm glad for that too, because that's taking it a bit too far. People argue, people get in fights. That's a normal part of a relationship. You have discourse, you have disagreements. So, yeah, that's taking it a bit far.
On rocket launchers, yes, you can legally buy them in the U.S., depending on which state you're in, and depending on if you go through the proper NFA Title II paperwork.
You gotta be kidding me. You can actually buy rocket launchers. Oh, man. I don't know. I think a rocket launcher is a bit excessive. That's my opinion. I'm gonna have to disagree. We're gonna have to agree to disagree on that one. Ooh. Anyway, onward. But on the NFA thing, I think that's something I do agree with. I do agree on background checks. I don't know about the Valentine's Day massacre or anything, or basing it off of illogical responses. I think the logical thing to do is to make sure that people who are going to use firearms are not going to use it irresponsibly. A rocket launcher. Man, I can't believe that. So be it.
A very time-consuming one. All right, now, given that, I do believe that there should be maybe a few extra restrictions with rocket launchers and grenade launchers, because there does come an enhanced danger. But it's still technically, for the most part, legal if you go through the proper processes.
Well, at least you agree there should be some restrictions on rocket launchers. I'm glad for that. It's a bit excessive.
Somebody in one room and then everyone else in the other rooms don't hear it. That's completely made up. In fact, your best suppressors on the market are probably going to get a good 30 decibel reduction, which means you're taking the sound of a gunshot, let's say from an AR-15, 5.56 rifle, I think 160 decibels down to 140 decibels, which 140 decibels is about the same as a jackhammer. So no, you're not making the rifle super quiet. You are reducing the decibel level to a little bit more of a manageable sound, and I think that helps out greatly, especially when you're teaching new shooters. It also helps your hearing protection. And if you ever fired a firearm indoors, well, you know that you probably want a suppressor on your home defense gun if possible.
So wait a minute, this is something I didn't know about. Are you telling me that they do not want silencers on weapons, on automatics or rifles? That's just stupid. Because why? Because I already know that silencers are not as silent as the anti-gun people say they are. I already know that. But I didn't know that they were trying to restrict silencers. Like, I would think that those would be important for hearing protection. Like, that's a good idea to have silencers for people who are using them, so they do have hearing protection. Like, I mean, there's a certain decibel. If you get exposed to it repeatedly, you're going to damage your eardrums. Like, I mean, if you're going to the range every day and that's the type of weapon that you're using is something that has a really high decibel rate and you can't put a silencer on it, I don't agree with that. I think you should be able to have a silencer. I think that that's healthy. I didn't know that they were trying to make that illegal, honestly. I didn't know.
I think that might have been one of the sets of videos you saw with the no ID, no paperwork, no background check videos. He went state to state to state. He went to a few different states and bought firearms there with no paperwork, no ID. In fact, some of those videos looked a little staged, but I'll take them as that.
I'm glad that you do agree that there should be some rules followed on the state to state thing, but actually no, I did not watch a video on gun shows on YouTube. Actually, there was an ex-boyfriend of my mother who did this. He went into a gun show and she witnessed this, that people were buying guns with no actual background check or paperwork or anything. They would just literally walk in and buy this. Now, that's not to say that those gun shows are probably breaking some laws. But no, I didn't see that on a video. That's actually from my mom's experience hanging out with this guy that she actually had to break ties with him because he started getting really kind of crazy, but he was also involved in some other illegal activities. No, that didn't come from a video. That came from seeing some, probably like my mom seeing some illegal activity going on. But so apparently there are some gun shows out there, and I'm not saying that they're legal. I'm saying that they do exist. My mom's been to one, and she was uncomfortable with it because she doesn't really like guns either. She doesn't want to own one. I don't think she really has a standpoint on guns one way or another, but she definitely doesn't want to own one. Where she saw this happening, and that's where I got that from, not from a YouTube video. But I think you agree that shouldn't take place.
Moreover, what laws would you suggest, Jinks, to remedy the situation with no ID, no background check, no paperwork at purchases at gun shows, so to speak? I mean, on your last video, you did say that you didn't have a problem with me transferring my firearms to friends, family, or trading with friends, family, loaning with friends, family, yada yada, or me borrowing a firearm from friends or family. But I mean, how do you enforce such a law like that?
That's an excellent question. And really the question that comes to my mind is, how do we really regulate any law that a mass constituent of people out there break? Well, the truth of the matter is you can't. I mean, people are going to break laws. People are going to find loopholes. And the best you can do is hold them accountable to breaking the law, but not passing authoritarian legislation because some people are doing it as opposed to others. It's like, that saying that one person ruins it for all. And I think in a democratized society, we try not to do that. We try and hold the individuals accountable for their individual actions, and that is where they lose their privileges or rights because they're abusing them. And I think that's the way that the law counters a lot of things. Like drug use is one. It's Still, it's illegal in. I don't have to say that. Purchasing drugs illegally, you can't stop it. We have all these laws on the books, but yet it still happens. And the thing is that even with prescription medications for pain management, that gets passed around in the black market. And it's like, do we hold everyone accountable that's on pain management and stop prescribing this to people who are in incredible amounts of pain that need this pain management narcotic medication to deal with it? No, we can't hold them accountable because they're not responsible. I think the point therein is holding individuals responsible for their individual actions. That's one thing that I get tired of in the SJW, is lumping everybody into one category and saying they're all accountable because one person did one thing. Actually, I saw that recently, is that they said all gay white males are racist because one bartender or one nightclub owner that they could think of used a racial slur. So it's like one person you found in the white male LGBT community is racist, and then so all of them are. That's a gross overgeneralization. I think we should stop. Like feminists do this to males. Like they even say that homosexual males are misogynistic. It's like, how? Because they're not interested in vagina. Like, biologically speaking, the brain's wired differently. I don't know what to tell you. Like, this has been scientifically proven. But it's they want to hold an entire group accountable for the actions of few, and that's where I look at it and say, no, I don't believe in taking rights and liberties away from everyone because of a few individuals. I believe in holding the individuals accountable. That's what I believe in. That's what I think the law should be centered around. You're not going to stop crime. You just can't do it. It's not possible. People will find a way to do illicit activities regardless of how society feels about it. And I think that we need to hold the individuals accountable and not the entire society. It's just like fireworks. Some dumbass blows their hand up and, oh, we're going to make fireworks illegal. It's like, why are we holding everyone accountable for the people that do use fireworks responsibly because one or a few people out of the many that use them, just a few people use them irresponsibly, so therefore nobody can have them. And that's what I disagree with. I think that if you're stupid enough to blow up your own hand with a firework, then you kind of get what you have coming to you. I mean, they've already received their punishment. I don't think that we should punish the entire society over one person's individual actions. I think that individual should be held for their individual actions. And I think that's how the law should work. Unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to homicide, murder, things like that, it comes a little too late. And that's unfortunate. But ultimately, like, they can't even regulate drug laws. They can't. They have so much trouble even stopping that. So how are you gonna regulate people exchanging weapons between each other? You just can't do it. You just can't, until something extreme happens. And like I said, hold the individual accountable, not the entire group of people, because there's a lot of people that are responsible with firearms and everything works out fine. It's the people that do irresponsible things that should be held accountable, not the society as a whole. All right, I did skip a video clip to get to this point, but he started talking about the suicide, and he was talking about how gun controllers want more gun control to try and control suicide rates. And he says that gun control has nothing to do with suicide. That's absolutely correct. The thing is that while, yes, having the gun there does make suicide easier, and you don't have the time to make second choices, like after you've pulled the trigger, you don't have that. If you overdose on medication, you can go to the hospital, get your stomach pumped, you can be saved. But ultimately, no, gun control is not going to lower suicide rate. What's going to lower suicide rate is psychological attention. And it's very important that if you do have chronic suicidal thoughts, to seek psychological help. And in this generation, I did a video on this, there is a new medication out there on the market that is a non-SSRI, which is amazing. It's Calypsol. it plays on glutamate as opposed to dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and endorphins. So it's playing on a different part of the brain, and it's highly, highly effective. In fact, it can even prevent depression in situations that would cause your brain chemistry to get messed up and actually cause depression. It can actually prevent that. This is a brand new thing on the market that, as far as psychological treatment goes in the psychiatric and the pharmacological community, nothing like this drug has been seen before. And I would highly recommend that if you are having suicidal thoughts, you seek this out. It has another name, and a lot of people are going to go, oh my God, because it has traditionally been used as a party drug, but they have found that low doses of it even can prevent or even stop depression for long durations of time. It's highly effective. They've done multiple studies, multiple tests on this. Ketamine. In fact, the vet that I was talking about with the severe PTSD, I believe he went on some ketamine. Yeah, he went on ketamine therapy. And it was highly, highly effective. I think he did. I'm not sure. He talked about it a little bit, so I'm not entirely sure on that. But from the studies that I've read on using ketamine to treat depression, it is basically like a miracle drug. They're calling it a paravaccine, which means it's vaccine-like. We don't have a cure for depression. All we can do is treat the symptoms. But this is as close to a vaccination as we've ever had. It is the closest thing to a cure to depression than any other medication we've ever had out there on the market. But there's also other strategies and techniques and ways of managing your mood, managing things. What Dr. Timothy Leary was doing in experimenting with psychedelics is he was trying to, essentially there's a trigger in the mind and then a response. What he was trying to do was change the trigger in the mind using psychedelics, try and alter the mind itself so that you wouldn't have the response at all. Now, modern day psychology is not allowed to use things like the psychedelics that Dr. Timothy Leary was using, who is a Harvard University psychologist, a psychiatrist. He actually helped develop a lot of different psychological evaluations and tests. This guy was a genius, and he got dismissed because he was using LSD in psychotherapy, and he had a 100% success recovery rate. Fucked up that they came in and said, well, you can't use this drug, even though he had a 100% success recovery rate. Well, now I think as we move into into the new generations, people are looking at things like psychedelic or hallucinogenic drugs as treatments. Like psilocybin has shown to have a high correlation or a high promise rate to treat depression. And ketamine is one that's already been FDA approved. It's considered an essential medicine in every hospital. Pretty much every hospital carries it. And they started discovering that it has this side effect where people are inappropriately happy. So they decided to test this and found out that it's a great drug for treating depression. So that being said, aside from using drugs to treat depression, there are ways to manage your mood disorder. There are ways. Oh, wait, that's what I was talking about. What modern psychologists do, because they can't use these hallucinogens, is they'll look for the trigger and then they'll try and change the response. So basically, if you have that trigger of suicidal thoughts, instead of going and doing the things that make you more depressed or make you inclined to do things, they might suggest, well, when you have these thoughts, go and do this activity. Activity is really, really important when it comes to suicidal thoughts and depression, as it elevates dopamine and endorphins in your body, in your mind, in your brain, and it can actually sway the depression in another direction. You'll still kind of feel the effects of the depression as they are episodic; they're beyond your control. But yeah, there are ways of managing it, and I would suggest that to anyone who has suicidal, especially continual suicidal thoughts. You have continual suicidal thoughts, you need to talk to a psychologist, and you need to seek a psychiatrist if medication is the route you want to go. But psychologists also have a lot of very good means of managing depression and suicidal thoughts. But no, regulating guns will not fix that. It won't fix it. It won't. Because honestly, when somebody starts having those suicidal thoughts and gets into that deep, dark, depressive state, if they're serious about it, they're going to contemplate seriously, regardless if there's a gun around or not. And there's a multitude of ways to do it. And unfortunately, even when there isn't guns involved, they still find a way to commit suicide. And the thing that I think a lot of people don't think about when it comes to suicide, and these thoughts do leave your mind in a depressive episode, is how selfish it is, because it's not you that's hurting the most, it's the people that care about you that are really going to hurt the most after you die. Really, honestly, it's the lucky ones are the ones that don't have to say goodbye because you're dead. You're dead. You don't have to say goodbye. You don't have to experience that pain. It's the ones that have to endure that emotional pain of losing somebody they love that have to endure a lot of pain. But when you're depressed, all you think about is your own pain. You don't think about that this will pass. This depressive episode will pass. This suicidal thought will pass. It's just a fleeting notion, and you need to write it out, and everything will be okay. So in sum up for me, yes, I hate authoritarian law. I think a democratized civilization has no room for dictatorship, which is what I sum authoritarian law up to. But yes, and I also agree that not everyone probably needs to own a firearm. And I'm glad that you did say that restricting guns isn't addressing the real issue with suicide. And that's very, very true. And I'm glad that you said that. That is, to me, is a true humanitarian thing to say. And my crazy gun thing, that's just, it was just kind of for fun, like just for laughs. But yeah, I know it was really good doing this with you. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. And I don't know if you realize, but this doesn't happen a lot, especially with the SJWs out there. And I'll catch you later.
All right, so man, in conclusion on this, I think we can agree that firearm ownership isn't exactly for everybody. That there are some people that probably just should not own a firearm. I think we can agree, though, that just infringing on the rights of everybody just on a whim is not the best idea either. And certainly, I think we can agree that passing laws just in our emotion after a tragedy often leads to bad results, or at least leads to laws that we really shouldn't have had on the books, that have no effect, that do nothing but violate people's personal freedom. I think we can agree on that. And again, I'm still looking forward to hearing more of your ideas on the topic, if so choose. I think it's good that we can have these discussions here on that one. All right, Jinks, man, you take her easy out there.